Hi, Lorraine. Hi, Cheryl.
Hello.
Hi.
Good. Well, let's try it.
Lorraine, are you on the East Coast?
No, it is the background.
You wish you were on the East Coast?
I wish I was on the East Coast. I wish it was fall.
Hi, Jose.
Hey, Vivian. How are you?
How are you?
Great, great.
System sounds. Settle down.
Ability meeting.
Hello.
Hi, Dan. It is, to whoever asked that.
I
Am
hear
I-
nobody.
Dan, you can't hear me?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're still letting people in here.
Yes.
2 minutes.
We'll give it about 1 more minute and then go ahead and get started. One of the leaders across the city of our neighborhood council system and former board member of the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. So thanks for being here, Glenn. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ernie Hidalgo, the chair of the NCSA, and I'd like to welcome you to today's listening session on the future of neighborhoods. First, we'd like to advise you that this Zoom webinar is being recorded and will be posted online. Also, we invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat by listing your name, neighborhood council, and what brought you here today. And while you're doing that, I'll quickly acknowledge our board members, Lisa Hart, Don Dwiggins, Dr. Lorraine Lundquist, Muriel Nakar, and Jose Pelico. The Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance advances sustainability and resilience across Los Angeles through advocacy, sharing of best practices, and community action. Today's event is one of those activities. And to tell you a little bit more about that, I'd like to now transition over to Miss Lisa Hart.
Hi, everybody. And thank you, Ernie, and welcome, everyone. As you probably are all aware, since you're on this call, there is a lot of overlap between housing and sustainability issues. So I was super excited when the mayor's office reached out to us about co-hosting this session. And in particular, I really want to thank Dominique Hargreaves, Christopher Hawthorne, and Alejandro Gonzalez of the city. So I wanted you also to know that today's session is related to a project we've been working on for the past year or so. Some of you might have been to an event we hosted in Tarzana in June 2019. That feels like 10 years ago, but it was a year ago. And since then, a group of us have been working on sustainability guidelines for developers. So when I have a moment, I'll put a link to those guidelines in the chat for you to check out, for you to share, and for you to contribute to. And today is an opportunity for you to tell the city and this community what you want your neighborhoods to be like. The listening session, which is the bulk of this session, will be divided into 3 sections. We're going to be talking about buildings, we're going to be talking about transportation, and we'll also be talking about resilience. Time is probably going to be tight, so depending on how many people are on the call, it might be hard for everybody's voice to be heard. So in case you don't have time to get your thoughts out to the group, when we do the eval at the end, you'll be able to add any additional thoughts into that survey. So we want to make sure your voice gets heard, and that's one of the ways you can do it. Thank you, and now I'll hand it off to Lorraine.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy to see so many people here talk about such an important topic. We want to establish some ground rules. This is a listening session. We want to hear from you, but that means we don't want to hear from just a few of you. We want to have everyone have a chance to speak up. We want to have everyone feel respected. So we're going to establish a few ground rules in terms of the discussion in play here. Lisa's going to put them into the chat, and I'm going to speak about them. The first one is we're asking you to assume everyone has good intent and to give people the benefit of the doubt and demonstrate respect and appreciation. This one's really key, especially on Zoom. We need to refrain from having side conversations in the chat that can be really distracting from the topic at hand. And we really do want to hear you. We want to hear everyone. And those side conversations can really get in the way. So related to that, please listen intently. The next one is step forward and then step back. So we want to hear from you, but when you have spoken for a time, we ask you to step back and let other people have a chance to speak. So please speak up, but don't be the only one speaking up. Speak concisely. This is not a time to pontificate, and have fun. Are there any questions about our ground rules? Okay, well, I am so excited to introduce our guest today. We have Christopher Hawthorne. Christopher Hawthorne is the city's first Chief Design Officer. This is a post that was created to improve the quality of civic architecture and urban design across Los Angeles. And I'm sure that Christopher will tell us more about what that means to him and about the work that he's been doing. But in general, his office is there to promote welcoming, economical, and ambitious architecture and urban design. And that is exactly what we are here to talk about today. We are here to talk about what that looks like in terms of the kind of city that we all want to create together. So I'm going to turn it over to Christopher.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lundquist. Thanks to Lisa, thanks to Ernie, thanks to everyone at the NCSA. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I want to thank everyone for your participation and spending a good chunk of a Saturday afternoon helping us with this project. And let me thank a couple of my city colleagues as well, Alejandro Gonzalez, who's been really instrumental in helping to organize these sessions, of which I'll give you a few more details in a second. Dominique Hargreaves, my colleague in the mayor's office as well, who will be the facilitator for today's session, and everyone on our team who has been helpful with this project. So today's listening session is one of 5 that we have organized. It's actually the 4th of 5 to be held, and we have one more. We've had a busy week, 4 of them since Monday. And we are using them to inform the brief for a design challenge, which will be asking architects, designers, landscape architects, other housing experts to propose some solutions for low-rise housing typologies that will both allow us to produce more housing, particularly more affordable housing, and particularly the kind of housing that is flexible, that would allow folks to age in place in their own neighborhoods now during COVID-19, give people a place to safely quarantine or separate themselves from their household if they need to. So we're interested in providing that new housing and layering it into existing neighborhoods while also really protecting the coherence and stability of those existing neighborhoods and giving neighborhoods as much autonomy and self-determination as we can in terms of the future of their own neighborhoods. And that's really where these sessions come in. We did not want to have a design challenge where we asked architects to produce solutions in a vacuum or produce ideas that would be imposed on neighborhoods from without. We wanted to hear from communities in a range of ways how you would like to see your own community, your own neighborhood evolve over time. And we want to then ask architects to help us sketch out those visions that respond to your concerns, your anxieties, and your aspirations for the future of your own block, your own neighborhood, and your own city. So to that end, we have organized 5 listening sessions organized by theme. We had one on infrastructure investment, both new transit lines and new open space, and talked about the ways in which that investment sometimes raises a lot of concerns in neighborhoods about displacement, about speculative investment that is attracted around those new investments, and raises concerns about gentrification, displacement, and housing instability. We looked specifically at the Taylor Yard G2 site that the city has purchased and is planning a significant open space project, and Destination Crenshaw, which is organized as a more than mile-long outdoor museum to preserve and protect the culture of Crenshaw Boulevard and Black Los Angeles as the Crenshaw line is is installed in that part of Los Angeles. We looked at affordable housing models for inspiration for the architects who will be participating. We looked at transformative climate communities and focused on Pacoima Beautiful and Watts Rising, two organizations that are working with state grants under the TCC program. Today, as you've heard, we'll be talking about sustainability, both at the macro and the micro level, which is to say the regional and the site level, both in terms of how sustainable your house or residential architecture is and where we build housing on a regional scale. I know these are issues that you have thought and talked a lot about in this group. And we'll have a final session, a fifth session on community land trust and other cooperative housing models. As mentioned, we're recording all the sessions, including today's. We will add those sessions to the website for the design challenge. We will use these sessions to inform the final version of our brief that we will send out to architects and landscape architects and others who will be participating. We will launch that design challenge in the second half of October, again, informed by all of these conversations. And it's really crucial that we ground all of these efforts in the voices of folks in communities. We want to be hearing in a range of ways, as I've described, how people are feeling about the evolution of their own neighborhood. So on behalf of the whole team in the mayor's office who's been working on this initiative, let me thank our funders as well. We have support from the James Irvine Foundation, the Department of Water and Power, and this is part of a larger research initiative that also has support from a group of other funders whose logos you can now see perfectly timed on the screen. So having said all that, let me thank you again for being here. I really look forward to the conversation. Thanks to Dr. Lundquist, and I'll hand it over to Dominique Hargreaves, my colleague, who will be facilitating the conversation this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And yes, thank you to NCSA, your board, and all of your members and people who, are really leading the way on sustainability for Los Angeles from the ground up. So I will be facilitating this session, and Christopher will also jump in from time to time. And we are now going to move into 3 30-minute sections, during which I'll give you just a few prompts to think about. And then I'm going to call on someone from the audience to respond. And after that, please raise your hand either physically or use the raise hand function in Zoom. And then we'll move through everyone's comments. At the end of the first 30 minutes, we're going to change topics. And then again, after that, 30 minutes. And then there will be a short closing section with announcements from NCSA because there's a lot going on around the network. So I'm going to start my timer for 30 minutes from now and quickly move to our first topic. So the question that I want to prompt our thinking with is going back to what Chris was just describing. As a region, where should we be looking to establish new housing units? And what should these units look like, or what should they strive to be from a sustainability perspective? So I wanted to throw out there 2 important targets that are from our Sustainable City Plan to also help you think about what your responses might be to this question. So one target is that all new buildings in the city of Los Angeles will be net zero carbon by 2030, and 100% of buildings will be net zero carbon by 2050. So as we know, Los Angeles is hugely diverse. Our built environment totals over 2 billion square feet, and a lot of that is residential. So this is an interesting question to think about. As we grow, how do we enhance sustainability and essentially over the next 30 years, zero out carbon from everything that already exists? Second target, just to keep in mind, is that we will reduce building energy use per square foot for all building types 22% by 2025, 34% by 2035, and 44% by 2050. So as we grow, how do we essentially use less energy and less carbon. So I am just going to pose a few more questions, just thinking about what kind of design strategies you might want to see as your neighborhood grows and evolves. And also, how do we think about solar, on-site solar and storage as well in our neighborhoods? I think these are all pretty interesting, ambitious questions to be thinking about. And so I want to call on Dan Kegel. Can you unmute yourself and give us your take on this question? I'm also going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm struck by three key things, and I think that I'd like to see the building code encourage these. First is there's the passive house standard, which is like, let's see what the lowest energy house is we can build without increasing cost. And it reduces energy use by about 90%. The second is encouraging induction cooking and heat pumps instead of gas stoves, furnaces, and air conditioners. That would help with indoor air quality and reduce climate pollution. And then the third is, as long as we're going to have rooftop solar and storage, we should use it to provide resiliency. So we should encourage buildings to have enough storage so that they can ride through an evening or a night or a week, and have their lights stay on and their fridges stay cold, even if there's an earthquake or something. Those three things together would make me so happy.
I'm with you. Sounds good. Next up, I see Joanne. Joanne, can you unmute?
There we go. I go to a lot of public works hearings, and I also chair the Planning and Land Use Committee for my neighborhood council, and I also chair the Trees Committee for the NCSA. And the one counterproductive thing that I observe day in, day out is that developers and designers are not designing around trees. And I think that we have a backwards sustainability when it comes to trees, that trees need to be considered first, not at the end. Usually at the end, the Board of Public Works is saying, oh my gosh, this is all in place. So that's why I got involved in planning, because it seems to me that we have trees that give ecosystem services. They clean the air, they create shade, they help with the carbon footprint. Sometimes a 30 degrees difference between under a tree and not under a tree on a hot day. So it seems to me that that should be first. And if you're going to plan a city project, either plan it around trees, but don't plan to take out so many trees. The people mover has been disastrous in terms of the number of mature trees that have been removed down in that Manchester corridor. And that's it. I just need to make a plea for the trees because they can't speak.
Perfect. Thank you. Next, we have David.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm David Silvis. I'm actually on the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. I'm the chair of Pluck. I actually had to say I'm all for sustainable models and implements that to architecture and building that actually improve the environment. However, there is a concern that is this appropriate for all neighborhoods? And this is more or less gearing toward the aesthetics. I know it's very easy on a new build construction to sort of go with what is in vogue at the time. Of course, if it's a new build, it'll be modern. But how can we implement design aesthetics on environmentally sort of conscious builds that would be appropriate for surrounding neighborhoods, the aesthetics, and also, fitting in? Is there some limitation to doing more traditional design builds appropriate for older neighborhoods, and also adapting the environmental important things that are on there. I also want to add that I think it's very important to implement fine landscaping with the projects to really incorporate a lot and put emphasis on landscaping, trees, and greenery whenever these new builds are there, with, of course, the environmental protocols that go along with that. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Glenn, you're up.
Okay, Glenn Bailey. Just wanted to follow up on Joanne's comments and some other things that are going on with regards to designing sustainability in terms of accommodating solar energy. And that is the dichotomy between wanting to have more and more trees, which I'm all for, to reduce the heat island in our cities, but then assuming you plant substantial trees to do that, then you're limiting the opportunities for solar energy production. And I don't know that there's how the city is really looking at that. But I want to throw out a few thoughts. First of all, it seems like the city, in terms of liability for future repairs and maybe maintenance, I don't know, but they're planting very small trees like crepe myrtles, which are really more like a bush in native time. But that's what they're planting in many areas. They're very pretty for a short period of time, but they don't have the potential to really reduce the heat island effect and really provide shade reduction for homes and these type of, what we're talking about, which then reduces energy conservation. A lot of folks, I mean, this been a very hot summer, and they're only going to get hotter until we turn the corner on this, are spending $500, $600, $700 on their electricity bills. So imagine if they had planted some trees and had their house shaded, several decades ago, and reduced that temperature. So to that end, I think in terms of the design, that we need to rethink the fact that we put 3 or 4 or 5 foot wide parkways for what purpose? Really, wouldn't it be better to look at an alternative design where maybe the sidewalk is up to the curb, went for such narrow parkways, and maybe have some dedicated areas where larger trees could be planted? Also, in terms of low-rise development, the configuration, maybe if a 0 lot line where we had, say, 2 homes back to back, and then that might increase the space that's available to plant large trees. Because right now you have 5 feet on either side yard of the homes, and 5 feet is not large enough on your own property. It would be 10 feet on the 2 properties, but 5 feet on 1 property to plant a large enough tree. So the last comment I just want to make in terms of sustainability is that I see in the valley that they're building very dense development near the orange line. On the guys, it's on transit and that sort of thing. And my concern is that we should be focusing on where we have rail lines or future rail lines, not built now, but looking at that towards the future. When you have before COVID-19, the orange line was already at capacity during peak hour, and so putting up very dense development for the only rapid transit line that's serving the Southwest Valley, when it's standing room capacity again during normal times, there does seem to be a conflict there. So thank you.
Thank you. Scott, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Scott Epstein. I'm the president of the Mid-City West Community Council and a brand new board member on the NCSA. I have long been a proponent of missing middle housing, and I've long been concerned about parking requirements and other regulations that prevent us from building the types of naturally affordable housing that really built LA in the 1920s through 1940s, the bungalow courts, the fourplexes, the courtyard apartments. But my lived experience recently has added a wrinkle to that equation. which is that I have a toddler. I am not somebody that can afford to live in a single family home, and I'm beginning to understand the quality of life importance of having just a little bit of private space, outdoor space. And I'm beginning to understand personally how parking requirements and these other regulations also prevent us from building the kind of multifamily housing that I think a lot of people in my situation would like to enjoy, with any kind of decent private garden or outdoor space. We're just very, very bad at this in Los Angeles. So I'd really love to see this design competition look at that. You know, where I live, the Fairfax district, the Spanish fourplex is the kind of quintessential building type, right? But even our fourplexes don't have, most of them have pretty much no open space for the 4 units. But it's easy to imagine if you remove parking requirements, you know, doing a split yard in the back and rooftop gardens on the top. And all of a sudden, for people that don't want a car, maybe want to be transit adjacent, you could live in a multifamily situation and also have some private outdoor space. That's really huge quality of life thing. So I would love to see the design experiment look at something like that. Like, how do we bring some of these types into the 21st century and get some of that California living into the multifamily world?
Thank you so much. That was great feedback. Next up is Shelly. Shelly does not appear in her video. Shelly, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Thanks.
I just have cats and a dog and all that, so I thought I'd be kind and save you from that. Thank you. I'm Shelly Billick. I'm chair of CFAC, the Community Forest Advisory Committee. Hi, NCSA board. I'm a former board member of the NCSA as well. And a couple of short comments. One is that I see a lot of development in the few green wild spaces we have left, like in the mountains and the hillsides. And as you know, we are a biodiversity hotspot, one of 35 in the world. And we're pretty much destroying the little wild lands that we have left, especially in the Santa Monica Mountains. So I would not like to see low-rise housing go there. I think we should actually prevent from building there altogether. Second is the fact that we use, we're one of the really, we probably don't even think about this, but we use potable water for our toilets, and we don't have good gray water systems. And I love us to see have these low-rise units have gray water installed so that sinks, showers can go right back into toilet and be used again. And that would be a huge energy savings as well, since we use a lot of energy in the city to pump water. And lastly, I really love what Scott Epstein had to say about just open space for families, but also for growing food. I think if we had these, like, 4 or 6 unit places where there's shared yards, shared community gardens, it would really build more community, give us a little bit more food security for healthful food, allow us to compost our food discards into the soil, and kind of be a little bit more environmentally resource self-sufficient. So I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelly. It's great feedback. Dawn, you're up next.
Mute myself. Okay. I'm kind of looking downstream a bit on this and some of the larger picture. We've been talking about the way things are now and kind of looking forward a little bit. Although some of the tree discussion obviously has like a several decades perspective. What I'm also looking at, though, is the changes that we're up to in the kind of available energy that will be available to us 10, 20, 30 years down the road. fossil fuels are going away. I mean, it's a finite resource, and we're pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel now. The alternative renewable energies, by their very nature, are constrained. I mean, you can, the entire Earth gets sort of a daily budget of energy. So we're looking at a very different picture of energy and the way that we things we have available. So to me, I think we need to be looking at a kind of a slower, smaller future in general, taking more time for things and so on. And I'm wondering if that kind of ideas or thought enters into the planning picture. Are we pretty much assuming that things are going to be like they are now, only more and better?
Thank you, Don. That was very thought-provoking. Next up is Vivian.
Hello, Vivian Escalante, born and raised in Boyle Heights. I'm actually the chairperson for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council Historic Preservation Committee, and I also sit on the Plan and Land Use Committee. I'm also the president of the Boyle Heights Community Partners nonprofit, who focuses on historic preservation in our community of Boyle Heights. And I am actually wanting to address many things. There is actually an article that Curb publication came out with regards to the bungalow. I think that that's really important. It was actually an article that talked about the bungalows for transitional living, actually for the homeless, which is really, really important that we address that. But the bungalow, and then this is a great article. I'll put it on the chat, because it's talk about homeless housing developer aims to bring back the bungalow court. And the bungalow court, again, as the ones that we currently have now, are really self-sustaining. I mean, they're made a lot better. They are a lot cooler. They probably just need some renovation. Most of them have yards, which actually aren't used maybe appropriately for gardening, which would be nice to bring that back and have neighbors share their vegetables as it was when I was growing up. And I think second to that is, if we're talking about transportation, I mean, I'm not, I actually don't support the TOD and the TOCs. I think they're very dangerous for our communities, as the high density is not necessarily healthy. I actually am about, healthier homes, healthier communities, which healthier homes for families, and we have bungalows, I think is the best way to look at these things, and lower density, as well as healthier communities, so that when you have bungalows, you have families together uniting, and you don't have these high-rise mega buildings where you lock people up, which is extremely unhealthy. As far as transportation goes, nobody's talking about the monorail. And, there's a company out there that actually is a monorail company. Now, the monorail is clean energy. It's flexible, it's smart, it's cost effective. And we really actually need to start thinking about that if we're wanting to go ahead and have a better transportation system, have some alternatives aside from the transportation that we have now, which actually doesn't need, rather meet the needs of the people that it's trying to serve. So I think that smart way is to seriously consider monorail, which can go further, again, cost a lot less, can go over buildings, through buildings, pretty much aligned with sidewalks, with freeways, again, cost effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rosina, you're next.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Rosina Jacobs, and I'm on the Pico Neighborhood Land Use Committee, and I live in the Wilshire Vista area, which is a very charming area bordered by Fairfax, San Vicente, Pico, and La Brea. And we have historic areas in our neighborhood, and we are desperately trying to preserve them from being destroyed by these high rises that have been coming into our neighborhood. And I'm very interested to see that Christopher Hawthorne is on this call, and I would very much like to hear him speak. I don't know if he's going to, because I think that his ideas and some of the ideas brought forward by Scott and Shelley and Vivian about healthy communities are really, really important. We've had these 5- and 7-story buildings slotted onto single family homes. As you said, they're not healthy for our community. They're not good for families. There's no room for older members of our community. There's no parks. It's no good saying that there's some trees on the roof. That doesn't help our parks. It doesn't help our children and our older people walking in the community. We need help in our community. And I would really like to hear Christopher Hawthorne address that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more hands raised, and then we'll give Christopher time to kind of react to everything that we've heard so far. So next up, we have Angie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, if you want to talk about high rises, come to my neighborhood, which is Koreatown. So the low-rise developments aren't even on the table because there is no land to develop on anymore. We have approximately, we are Oda Park. We have a huge heat indexed, huge glass towers are being imposed on us despite the neighborhood not wanting them. And I would encourage, not just on the design, I would encourage all of us getting together and putting a stop to some of these developments until they can be reimagined as 21st century developments. They're all using old technology. Gray water, they all have to be solar and gray water ready. I think they should be gray water and solar functional if they go along, especially if they're not adding anything to our neighborhood. We have the highest heat index and the least amount of green space. And my neighborhood council has 150,000 stakeholders. We're the largest. And we really want to have some parity with the sustainability and with green space. And just to go along with the bungalows, if you go to the northern part of the Wilshire Koreatown Neighborhood Council area, between Vermont and Normandy and Melrose and 3rd Street, you will find numerous bungalow courts that are charming and sustainable and a really great example of, you guys are all going to have to densify. There's no more space in my neighborhood, so you guys are going to have to take some of this off of us. But bungalow courts are a really good way to incorporate modern technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Zarita.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zarita Jones, and I'm actually with the Baldwin Lamertz Crenshaw Local of the Los Angeles Tenants Union, and I'm also the vice chairperson on Liberty Community Land Trust. So, I live within that beautiful Crenshaw corridor in which we're getting that beautiful rail. And I also wanted to say kudos to quite a few of the other speakers, like Dan and Joanne and Shelley, Vivian, and Rosalina about their ideas. And everything that I'm thinking is geared towards simplicity, durability, cost-effective solutions that are right now, meaning for our homeless population. And we're thinking about the lots that we have that are already empty, that single-family homes were on. They're approximately 10,000 square feet. And with that, we're thinking about these varied types of buildings and structures to solve the problems that the people in the neighborhood that can afford to be there. And one would be the tiny homes. We were thinking about those, which fall under the bungalow and the ADU kind of typology. And then we were thinking about the shared living and the co-ops, which that has, you can make green spaces built in on those lots, even if they're one tree in the center in order for them to have it. And we can also think about parking, because in my community, parking is atrocious. And we're not talking about everybody having a very large vehicle, but having a nice electric vehicle and a spot to park that is good. Then we're talking about, mobile home communities where you could fit different sizes and different types of homes. And we found that there are these mobile homes that are about 65,000 and you can fit multiple on a lot and they look beautiful. They look exactly like a home. And those that have, children can have the lofts and they can have a little green space and some deck area, and there can be some storage for each of the people. We're also thinking about our homeless and our temporary population. So not only are we thinking about, I guess you can say, the tiny homes and the bungalow styles and the mobile homes and changing some of the landscaping of that, we can also use some of the container type homes, which are quick and efficient. And we're thinking about things of passive design, natural ventilation, natural light, which will also help with the solar panels. And believe me, I am with the gray water conservation and using it for those beautiful trees and flowers that we want to plant on those properties. So I don't know if I actually ran out of time, but we were looking at the structures and also putting these properties or the land itself, these vacant lots, under community land trust. So that way the affordability stays there. And then you have a built-in stewardship, not the same as some of the things that are going up in my community that I see right now, where I need $120,000 in order to get a 1-bedroom apartment. And it's just not feasible in our zip codes and within our community. And we don't want to change that because we have what we have. We want to keep the kids in the schools that they're in. And 9 times out of 10, when someone becomes homeless, they remain in the same neighborhood in which they lived and they grew up. And that's what we're trying to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I want to let Christopher respond and also ask any clarifying questions for the group, and then I'll take us to our next prompt, and you can keep raising your hands. We're going to keep going in the order that they're raised.
Thanks, Dominique. I'm furiously taking notes. This has been super helpful already. I want to say that these are really, these are issues that have been of great interest to me for a long time. Many of you know I was the architecture critic at the Los Angeles Times before I joined the mayor's office, and wrote a lot about housing at precisely this scale, the history of bungalow courts. I wrote a book, in fact, in 2005 called The Greenhouse on new models for sustainable residential architecture for Princeton Architectural Press. So I've been thinking about these issues at this scale for a long time. And in fact, when I grew up in the Bay Area, when I lived in Oakland, I lived in one of the great models of this scale housing, a bungalow court or a courtyard project by Irving Gill, 8 units wrapping around a shared garden, mostly 1-bedrooms and a couple of 2-bedroom units. Exactly the kind of scale that you've been talking about, and the architectural thoughtfulness about the kind of transitions between private space, semi-private space, semi-public space, and fully shared or communal space in the interior garden were just really, really well handled. And none of those decisions added anything to the scale or introduced fancier, more expensive materials or added to the cost of the project. They were just about how to arrange the square footage on the site and how to, again, think about this relationship between shared and private space. And those various thresholds were really beautifully handled. So I think as many of you have already pointed out, there are really, really good models in LA's own history, bungalow courts, garden apartments, early experiments by architects, not just Gill, but Schindler, Neutra, a lot of our pioneering modernists did multifamily projects at just this scale that were affordable and really forward-looking, sort of proto-sustainable, I would say. Just one point to clarify, what we're looking at in this design challenge is just at low-rise neighborhoods. So I definitely hear all your comments about projects that are overscaled and TOC, and I have a couple more thoughts on that. But what we're asking is, how do we, if we all begin to have some consensus that we can't build at the edge into areas that are vulnerable to wildfire, if we have to build layer in new development closer to transit, closer to jobs for all the reasons that you are familiar with, where do we put that new housing, and particularly where do we put it in our low-rise neighborhoods? So that means neighborhoods that are 1 and 2 stories of housing, whether that's single-family houses or that's multifamily small-scale apartments or some combination of the two. And we really want architects to help us kind of think through how to do that. So I'm hearing a lot about trees and about, as you build more densely in these neighborhoods, what happens when you lose trees that provide cooling. What might be the city's response to produce more trees in the public right-of-way to help produce some of the cooling that might be lost if we're adding housing units and losing landscape space, or perhaps even better, how to build more units and keep the trees and the landscape and the cooling and the shared outdoor spaces. And I think that's very much an issue in COVID as well, spaces to spend time outdoors in well-designed and cool spaces together, obviously at a premium right now. And I think they will continue to be really valuable and attractive. So heard a lot of comments and definitely making note of them in terms of parking, relaxed parking requirements or changes to parking requirements or concerns about parking. Also the comments about induction cooktops, indoor air quality are very well taken. Questions about the median or lot lines and how architects and planners should be thinking about those questions. And to Rosina's point about overscaled projects, I think what we have had a kind of bargain in housing policy. We have pushed a lot of denser development onto transit corridors on our major boulevards. And we have heard from folks that some neighborhoods find that development too dense or out of scale. At the same time, we've largely not put a lot of housing in our low-rise neighborhoods with the exception of ADUs, which we have supported on the city side. And there's a lot of range in between. There's a lot of territory in all kinds of ways in between. And we really want to think through this process about the most thoughtful way to layer that new housing and have a more even approach to that question of scale and density. So these comments all so far are just hugely helpful, and keep them coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next prompt, and then we'll keep going with the hands that are raised. So the next layer we want to think about are what mobility options do you want to see in your neighborhood and future neighborhoods? And we're all, I think, probably cognizant of the governor's announcement recently that from 2035 and going forward, all car sales or new car sales will be required to be electric vehicles. That was a pretty bold move in the last couple of weeks. And it definitely supports some of the targets that are within our sustainable city plan. So one of them is increasing the percentage of trips that are made by walking, biking, micromobility, shared rides, and transit, reducing vehicle miles traveled per person, and increasing the number of electric and zero emission vehicles in the city over time. So for everyone that has a hand raised, you can comment on the previous section, or if you have comments on mobility, we're happy to hear all of that. And the next hand is Fanny.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, my name is Fanny. I'm from Boyle Heights. I'm a former treasurer for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council, as well as a former budget advocate for the city of LA. And I am currently the co-president of the First Community Land Trust in the East Side, Fideicomiso Comunitario Tierra Libre. So I want to mention a little bit about sustainability. I feel like we have a lot of empty lots, and they shouldn't be any vacant lots. They need to be converted into housing opportunities. And also there should be some kind of program for the city is working in partnership with CLTs and community-based organizations to develop on this empty lots. A lot of the different ideas that were mentioned by Sarita are amazing, and other folks also making sure that we have trees around But we do have a huge problem with homelessness, something that we had prior to COVID-19. And because of COVID-19, it has highlighted the inequities that the poor communities suffer as they are the most affected because of the pandemic. So we need to maximize those resources in making sure that communities can become sustainable and can continue thriving and staying in their communities. And as far as transportation, I feel that we do need to have car sharing programs. We do need universal basic mobility. So I would advocate for a fairless public transit. And I feel like strongly that the public transit also needs some kind of education program so they can learn to share the streets. Specifically, the public transit needs to share the streets and know the communities they're serving. Yeah, and have programs that slow down the speed programs and repurpose car lanes and parking spaces for bike lanes, parklets, promenades, and community spaces. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Roderick?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm here in multiple capacities. I'm on my neighborhood council. I just moved to LA, but I'm on the Westlake South Neighborhood Council, and I'm involved with Plug. And then I'm also the organizing director for Abundant Housing LA. And so I'm glad to see that the mayor is at a point where he is holding conversations like this, because it is really important. I don't know how many more are gonna be had, but just looking at the general, Zoom, at least the videos that are on, it's not at first glance entirely representative of our city. So I do hope that there will be more had in communities like Bull Heights or South Central or other places for people to also talk through this. And shout out to all the people from those neighborhoods who showed up today, first and foremost. But I just wanted to say, I think this topic is really important, and it is something we need to think about. In my opinion, I don't think it's something that should not happen as much of a matter as it should be. It's gonna happen, and what should it look like? Because the history is there about why the issues of Zarita's neighborhood or Fanny's neighborhood are directly tied to what is the neighborhoods that we're on the west side, and what neighborhood is considered well-resourced and what neighborhood isn't, and how zoning decisions play into that. And the zoning, the single family zoning in particular, was only created, the sole purpose of that zoning was created to perpetuate segregation. It wasn't for anything else. Whether we know that or whether we live that life or not. And I think it's also equally important for people to go around and look at other neighborhoods, because I live in Westlake and I live right by MacArthur Park, and our park isn't I don't really have a green space at all, and I'm looking at people on the streets with no green space. And so and we don't have the capacity in these neighborhoods to keep building up and up and up, because space is only so much at this point. And so I really do hope that this is something that can be talked about. When you look at these graphics or these modelings for missing middle, they come in so many different forms. They're not, people are quick to go to high rises, but before you even get to high rise, there are 7 different types of missing middle housing that you would not even be aware was in your neighborhood. And I think it's equally important to hold that everything we're going through right now in our country, we really need to think about race and class and climate change and who gets to live where and who doesn't, and why that is, because this is not something we can continue to do. LA County is predominantly people of color. So for there to be a neighborhood that doesn't even have some type of ethnicity outside of whiteness in a place with so many diverse groups, that should present a problem, and that should flag to people that has to be by design, not for any other reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Kira.
Hey everybody, I'm Kira Durbin from Sherman Oaks. to the nice lady from Koreatown that spoke earlier. I would love to take some of that density off your hands. We have a ridiculous amount of single family homes here. And there are two reasons for that, in my opinion. Number one, our public transportation here is terrible. So we don't even have an opportunity for like TOCs and adding the affordable units. My other biggest problem here in Sherman Oaks is groups like the Homeowners Association and our planning and land use management, which would basically rather die than see even like a 4-unit replace a single family home. I see gigantic new houses being built, and it literally makes me cry because I'm also the homeless liaison, and I'm thinking of all the people that are living on the street. And, you know, behind me, my little tiny place behind me, they're building 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes. So I would love to connect with anybody on this call. Most of you have probably seen me before. We just really need a lot more progressive ideas in Sherman Oaks. And I think there are other parts of the valley too. But Christopher, as long as I've got your ear, I think we have a lot of empty buildings, empty lots. And I think a lot of that falls under commercial zoning. And I think we could really do a lot of good by looking at the precedent that Krikorian recently set. If we can change some of that zoning, I think we have better opportunities. I'm personally less concerned about design, more concerned about all the wonderful sustainable things that everyone else has already brought up: trees, gray water, solar, all that great stuff. So please, anyone listening, please support me. I think I'm the only progressive person in Sherman Oaks sometimes. So please, and just a quick shout out to Roderick. So grateful for your group and your support. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Lindsay, I'm sorry, I was supposed to call on you earlier, Lindsay, but are you there?
Hi, yeah. My name's Lindsay Sturman. I'm from Larchmont, and I just wanted to talk for a second about, thank you for doing this. And I love what everyone is saying. It's really, sorry. I'm so inspired by this conversation. The thing that I think is so important is to connect the dots between housing and traffic. And I keep thinking that we need to, when we're thinking about people who are opposing housing, we have to think about being compassionate about where their opposition is coming from. And I think it's traffic. I think the whole city is in a state of despair about traffic and fear of traffic. And I think that the only solution to that is bike lanes and free transit and bus lanes. There's not a lot of solutions, but I'm open. I'm open to hearing from that, but I do feel like a lot of people are saying no. And so this is this conundrum we've gotten into. And so to me, I would love just for the city council to first of all, tell the community, because everybody I know wants bike lanes. And then a few people seem to really not want them. And how do we bring bike lanes to our communities? And I think that once you take away this traffic nightmare we're living in, where people can get on bikes, free transit, then you can open up so many more spaces to people will let down their opposition to more density. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that I don't know if you guys have talked about a vacancy tax, but I really feel like all of these buildings and lots and empty houses, I know people have a lot of arguments how much of an impact is, but it's just so hard to walk down Larchmont and see 10 empty storefronts and see empty houses in my neighborhood that's been empty for 20 years. I just feel like somebody should be living there. And so to incentivize people to, I love these ideas about the micro housing, on empty lots. Well, somebody owns that lot and they won't let go of it because they're not paying taxes on it and nobody is pushing them. So there are my thoughts, and thanks again for organizing this.
Thank you very much. Asata?
Hi.
Hi.
One of my major problems, my name is Asata, and I'm in South Central. I'm the president of the Hyde Park Organizational Partnership for Empowerment, and also a member of the planning committee for Park Mesa Heights Community Council. Okay, and one of the things that I don't know if it has been, I didn't hear anything about it, but one of the things that's been a major concern to me is the lighting, the street lighting across the city. And I don't know if a part of the reason that the lighting is so dark is because they were trying to do something sustainable. But I think sustainability also has to be something that corresponds with safety. And I don't know how many other people know, but there are actually situations where you don't know which way to turn because you can't see the street light. It's like the light has been dimmed over the sign to the point that you don't know what street you're on, and so that's a major problem. But so what do we do in order to make sure that there's enough light, particularly at night, for people to be able to see? The other thing, a major concern, is something that everybody's been talking about, and that's the issue of housing. And density is a major problem in our area. We actually need more space. People talking about open space, but also housing that is, we don't need more multiple housing. As a matter of fact, our corridor at this time, our Crenshaw corridor, is being bombarded by the transit-oriented communities. And even our commercial district has housing that some of the proposals are going up to like 7 feet, which is crazy. And again, in terms of density, that's a major problem because you need space, you need air to breathe, you need sunshine. And so want to make sure that, while some people have like areas where there's only 1 to 2 stories, that we want to make sure that communities that are able to keep at least a good portion of that, because that housing that goes like, say skyscraper high is really a problem in terms of, people being able to have air to breathe, space to go. So that's a major concern, making sure that we have balanced in our communities. Okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like how you brought up the point of increased safety. I think that's something all communities are grappling with, and that could be a really interesting thing for the architecture community to consider through this project. Next
Particularly
up,
as it relates to lighting.
Mhm.
Lighting is a problem.
Yeah. Next, we have Tracy.
Hi, everyone. Agree that this has been a great conversation so far and really appreciate all of the comments that we've had. I just wanted to point out, I currently live in Mount Washington, but I've lived all over the city and worked all over, and most recently lived in a bungalow court in Silver Lake. And so one concern that I had there, was very difficult to store a bike. Our place was so small. So I feel like if the competition could address that, needs outside of like how to promote using a bike if you can't even have a bike at your house, so safe places to store your bike, safe ways to have community laundry, things like that. Like maybe that's a part of this gray water system and the overall connected systems within the house. And echoing the point about the composting and kind of like thinking about full life cycle of events that happen at home. And obviously, like the current topic, just having solar charging be powerful enough that you can have an electric car. The same thing, we couldn't buy an electric car because there was no way to charge. So if that's built into the project so that everyone could do it, that would be great.
Great points. Thank you. Nancy?
Hi, I've learned so much already from this. Everyone's made so many great points, and but I just wanted to. I'm in Delray, and I'm on the transportation committee. I chair the NCSA transportation committee, and for sure, I support all the bike stuff, all the transit stuff. That's all great, and I think we definitely need to expand programs like Blue LA and have more EV shared programs. I know when we had a meeting with the mayor's office, Lindsay, I think, from the mayor's office, was pointing out that that was so popular that even during the downturn, they basically got so many calls they couldn't cancel it. So, and I think along with that, it would be great to have some software solutions where people in these sort of missing middle, share those vehicles and just not break that cycle of the one car
and misuse of leaf blowers. As I roll around my community, I have to be very careful that I don't get stuck in a cloud of, essentially dirt that
Right.
a leaf blower is blowing.
Yes.
I'm in a wheelchair and it could be very serious. And I wonder about seniors and children who also could unintentionally stumble into a
Ready.
major air hazard
I can listen.
problem. And
I'm just
these
listening.
these are leaf blowers,
And
not
if I do,
dirt
it's
blowers.
not the end of the world.
Okay, I was just hearing other people.
Yes.
Anyway.
Sorry, you guys, I had to mute everyone. We had some background comments, but Paul, do you want to unmute and finish your thought?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say that it's kind of discouraging when you see people misusing and abusing a technology that's in its name says leaf blower, not dirt blower. It's not Connecticut. This is Los Angeles. We have a dry situation, and it's almost overwhelming to think, how do we do this? Because in the code, they talk about keeping whatever, things you produce on your property, but people are just blowing everything into the public air. Thank you to the woman before who talked about clean air to breathe, because this is just an unnecessary hazard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Dan.
Hi, I should mention I'm on the Sustainability Committee in GWNC and now UNNC, and I'm also the Energy Committee Chair for the NCSA. Again, if we're still talking, I had a power outage, so I was kicked out of the meeting for a few seconds. Are we still talking about buildings?
Yeah, we definitely are. We've been talking a bit as well now about mobility solutions for neighborhoods, but buildings are fair game.
Right. So I had three thoughts about mobility. One is walkability is really important, and you have to have some place to walk. And an established neighborhood with places to walk is a great thing, and it's a treasure. And so all the bodegas out there, they're sort of an endangered species, and I think that we need to encourage them and build around them, kind of. Second, in order to reduce vehicle miles traveled and encourage walking, I think we need to be flexible about parking. And the way to do that, I think, is to unbundle parking so that people who don't need a car don't have to pay for the parking spot. People who want two parking spots can get one. But, this is something that Shoup pointed out a long time ago. Lastly, I think that if we want to have some open space, we need some density. And the missing middle people talk about going up to 2.5, 3 stories. So I think the neat thing about the 3 or 4 story height is that it's high enough so that the roof is not blocked by trees. So it gets the solar panels up above the trees, which addresses a comment somebody else had. And NREL recently calculated that all of the 3 to 4 story buildings had enough space on the roof to have enough solar to handle all of their energy needs. So that's sort of a sweet spot in size, I think. Anyway.
Great, thank you. All right, next up will be Mary Louise, and then I'm going to transition us to our last 30-minute section. Mary Louise, are you there?
Yes.
Mary Louise, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I have 4 points. First one is with respect to height in residential areas. I would like to see the zoning limit in residential areas, all housing, all buildings to 3 stories. That would be the limit. And the gentleman who talked about height and felt that 3 stories was good because you could get solar on there and the trees wouldn't interfere with that. I have solar. I live in a 1-story building and I have solar, and I also have large trees on my property, and they have been pruned so that they don't interfere with the solar. So I don't see the trees on the property, and for goodness sake, certainly not on the parking strips would interfere with any solar attempt that we made. This is the reason I'm against the roof gardens. I think the tops of buildings should be used for solar exclusively, no roof gardens. That is not public space, and developers get excused for inadequate space. But the roof garden is for tenants only, so it's not public space. Somebody mentioned houses that were vacant and never get rented. And I believe that a large part of that problem is that those homes have been sold to corporations who are very comfortable leaving the rentals vacant. Because they're not, they can't seem to get the price they want as a rental fee. And so it's not as though an individual were resisting renting the house. It's a corporation that's resisting it, and they let the property deteriorate. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. So in our next segment, we are going to be talking about resiliency. So we would love to get your thoughts in terms of what our architectural and design community can be coming up with through this design challenge that Christopher's group will be launching soon to improve resiliency in neighborhoods. So I'm going to share my screen again, and then I'm going to ask Jose to comment. So heads up, Jose.
Dominique, could I just jump in with one quick question?
Please.
It's Christopher, one quick follow-up. Thank you. I was struck by the comment, I think it was Dan, about places to walk to in the neighborhood. One of the things we're considering for the design challenge is the potential introduction or reintroduction of small-scale retail in low-rise neighborhoods, which is to say the corner store, which used to be legal and is now illegal in a lot of parts of the city. So if any folks have comments on all sides of that question, would you support the introduction or reintroduction of small-scale retail if it were thoughtfully incorporated into the scale of your neighborhood? Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Christopher. I wonder if, Alejandro, do you know how to create a poll with that question? We'll move on to the resiliency section, and then everyone can incorporate comments about retail. And if we can send that poll out, we'll do that too. So we are acutely aware this week and this month of how extreme heat is affecting our health and really affecting our ecosystem at large. So our prompt question is, what cooling strategies do you want to see in your neighborhood or in other neighborhoods? 2 targets from the Sustainable City Plan that relate back to this question include increasing tree canopy in the areas of greatest need by 50%. That's by 2028. And by 2021, we are planting at least 90,000 trees in the city. Also, a target in the plan is to reduce urban-rural temperature differential by 1.7 degrees by 2025 and 3 degrees by 2035. So I'm curious for all of you, what kind of cooling strategies you are interested in seeing. There are many. There are natural strategies like trees, and there are other things that have been tested out like cool pavement, cool roofs, etc. Let me turn it over to Jose, who will give our first comment.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And you actually touched on a couple of points that I was going to suggest myself. With of course, increasing the tree canopy. Being here in Boyle Heights, we have had a reduction in a lot of trees in our community. So we definitely would like to see the increase in tree canopy covers. Of course, would be cool roofs and pavements, green vegetative roofs, and possibly street vegetation, and altering the surface energy balance to reduce absorption of sunlight at the surface and transfer to the urban atmosphere. So those are a couple of things, but to your point that you mentioned, increasing the tree canopy and redesigning the development of future builds. Thank you.
Thank you. Conrad, are you there?
Yes, indeed, I am. So I've had a few comments that I've been accumulating here on one small piece of paper. So to small scale retail for Mr. Hawthorne, yes, we are in favor here in my neighborhood of Sycamore Square. And that is a concern of ours because we have so many large commercial spaces that seem to not be rented, even though they have all the modern conveniences. And yet we have thriving little shops that are, we wonder how long they'll be able to stay there because all of these properties are going up in value and we're afraid they might be redeveloped. So to the current topic, I reflect that so many of our 1920s and 30s homes that do have driveways had those two little strips of concrete, and then there was grass between them on either side. And nowadays it's wider driveways and more pavement. We had Marilee Kuhlman not too long ago at the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council's Sustainability Committee that Dan Cagle on this call now chairs. And she really opened my eyes to how important ground cover is. And it really doesn't seem to matter so much what it is. So encouraging ground cover on spaces, even in place of concrete, might even be areas where, where you do drive or walk, seems to be a wise way to reduce the ambient temperature. Now, another thing having to do with resilience is, of course, natural disasters. If you read the Resilient LA book, and I'm currently reading Lucy Jones's book, finally, and she calls out the fact that our current building codes, and I'm quoting, do not require developers to make buildings that can be used after a major earthquake, only buildings that don't kill you. So if the code works as it is supposed to, only about 10% of the new buildings constructed to the latest code will be red tagged. Sorry, about 10% will be red tagged. So part of resilience is, of course, building something once and not having to rebuild it again a week later because that chance event happened to happen right after you open. So I would definitely encourage seismic standards to be considered, especially for some of the larger buildings, so that whatever is approved is something that is likely to offer shelter after some of our worst projected earthquakes. And I'll just end it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Conrad. Stacy?
Hi, I have a question. This is for Chris. I met with Nora Chin of your office last year when there was a design competition being proposed that would be different in 5 CD districts. At that time, an architect who's a member of a design team that I'm a part of had spoken with her about what we call the SOS project, which involves resiliency and sustainability. It preserves affordable housing while adding all-inclusive housing, including grid housing and market rate units. And we had targeted a particular neighborhood that has a high number of RSO units that are immediately adjacent to the Exposition Corridor line. For a test neighborhood for such a project, the sustainability measures can't be overstated because we do not tear down any of the buildings. It's rehabilitation and preserving of those affordable units while creating additional housing. At that time, I was told to go through the affordable housing division of the mayor's office, which, as we know, there's no more funds available for homeless housing and very tight funds on affordable housing. So I'm just questioning, as we talk about resiliency and our need for preserving the housing and creating more density, where would we take this design idea? We have structural engineers and architects that have been working on it for 18 months. The pro forma costs on the units, I won't say out loud, but let's just say it is a fraction of what the city spends now on affordable housing or housing for the homeless.
Let me jump in, Stacy, to say that I'll put my email in the chat, and if you'd like to be directly in touch with me about that, we'll see. We could talk about a couple of options that may be that it's something that this design challenge might be the perfect vehicle for, or it might need to go somewhere else within the city, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're going to do a quick poll, but we're going to do it either by hands up or by using your tools that you have in Zoom to do a thumbs up or a clap or whatever it is. But Christopher had posed the question of people's inclination towards small retail or corner stores. So can everyone use their tool and show us your opinion there? And Alejandro on our team is going to count up your physical or digital thumbs.
I don't know if there's a thumbs down, so how would they express a no vote?
I guess
maybe put
you'd
your
have to put it-
physical hand down like this.
Cindy's asking what the question was. Chris, do you want to put it in your own words?
Of course. Would you support, if you live in a low-rise neighborhood, the introduction or reintroduction of small-scale retail, the corner store, what some in the chat have called an accessory, what was that, accessory commercial or retail unit? Bodega, well, we don't use that word bodega in Los Angeles, but you know what we mean when we say that.
Great. Thank you, guys. Okay. Next up is, oh, all the names are shifted. Sorry. Joanne. Joanne, are you there?
I was just voting with the hand up.
Oh, yep, got it.
You said you could vote that way. So I actually don't
Yes.
have a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my mistake. How about Robbie? I think you were probably also voting with your hand up, but we haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to comment? Robbie, are you there? Okay, now I'm confused with the hands, so I'm going to lower everyone's hands. And then if you have a comment, go ahead and raise your hand again. Sorry, guys. Oh boy, here they are. Okay, Kathy, we're coming back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm on the GWNC Land Use Committee and the Sustainability Committee. One of the things we haven't talked about is soil. Soil is incredibly important to a healthy ecosystem in terms of tree growth. And a lot of our soil is underutilized as a resource. There's a lot of techniques, old techniques like hugelkultur, which helps to retain a lot of moisture in the soil, which can be really beneficial for our drought parched environment in terms of growing trees and other plants. The other thing I'd like to talk about is streetscapes. I think it's a huge opportunity for livability, walkability, sustainability, resilience. And the city had the recent opportunity to apply for a grant for Uplift Melrose, and the city council person for that area had no political courage whatsoever and killed the application. It's just an application. It would have increased trees and seeding But the concern was the impact it would have on traffic. And once again, the tyranny of the automobile is destroying this city. And on the land use committee, I see it all the time where, you know, people are required to have a certain number of parking spaces. And then they cram in as many units as they can. They'll put a rooftop garden on their property, but there's no public amenity whatsoever. And if they're asking for bonuses in terms of density and not giving anything back to the community, I think that's a real failure of the program. And I love bungalow housing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Lorraine.
Thank you, everyone. These comments have been so enlightening, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity to have this discussion. One thing that just really strikes me in the way that the questions are framed about what kind of housing we want to see in our neighborhoods, what kind of mobility we want to see in our neighborhoods, is that part of the problem that we're facing here in Los Angeles is that so many of our neighborhoods are keeping out people who can't afford to live in those neighborhoods. That's causing a lot of our mobility challenges. It's causing a lot of our homelessness challenges. It's causing a lot of our housing problems and lack of housing. And I'm wondering how we can bring in to the conversation people who want to live in our neighborhoods and can't yet afford to. Do they get a say in what goes in the neighborhood, or is it only the people who live in the neighborhood that get a say in what their neighborhood looks like? And this is almost a feature it's almost built into the neighborhood council system, you know, that we are all within, and that the NCSA loves and cherishes and works within. But I am wondering if we can have more of a discussion about how to, you know, how can we really truly create a more equitable city if our system is designed such that neighborhoods are keeping people out.
Thank you. That's a great question. Next, we have Zarita.
Hey, okay, I'm gonna fit a bunch of stuff into a very short amount of time. I wanted to say greetings to Fanny, which is a friend, and Asada, which is a neighbor and a friend. And I wanted to just say thank you so much for Paul, because I'm now going to start referring what he's talked about as Paul's cloud. I also happen to be a disabled person. And so therefore, when it comes down to transportation, I am crazy for all of you guys that are willing to get out there and ride a bike and deal with the crazy drivers that we have in Los Angeles, but I just won't be one of them. I would prefer to maintain the status quo in which I've always been accustomed to, and I don't see myself riding a bike down the coastline to Malibu. I just don't see it. I would rather have my car. I would rather it be electric. I would rather have a spot for it right next to my bungalow, if that's, you know, what it is, plug it in and have my solar panels. Just to give you guys that visual. We used to have beautiful beach houses before that were small. We can do it again. We don't need minimum feet requirements. The ADUs are the way to go. I also want to say that I worked on that vacancy tax initiative, and I also put the vacancy tax report link into the chat in case anybody wanted to, you know, utilize some of their time and read all of that juicy material. And I also have a thumbs up for Christopher on the retail. I don't believe retail should be as large as it has been, coming from someone that managed in Albertsons for 24 years, and 24 to 25,000 square foot is not the business. I'm just, you know, we're so over that. Also, I wanted to say a comment on who gets the say in the neighborhood. Well, when it comes down to the Crenshaw corridor, we're starting to feel as though we haven't had any say. And so therefore, once upon a time, we had some beautiful retail stores. We don't have it anymore. It's all been destroyed. We had a lot of development activity, and they've honed in with the TOCs and the TODs and our legacy businesses, which are the people that have owned their businesses for 10 to 40 years, if not more, are now gone. These are people that I knew personally. It's very sad and very heart-wrenching. And I've always said, by being an advocate in a community, that we're not saying we don't want people to come, but don't come and change the dynamic so much that you lose the essence of what the heart of Leimert Park and some of the other enclaves that we have, where we have the beautiful jazz bands and the people playing in the park, and our what do you call that? Our neighborhood market shares and things that we do that make our community so unique. And I'm assuming people are coming to this community because they want to be part of that. So you can't have a say from people on the outside to change the community, and then it's not actually what it is. So I'm kind of in the middle of road on that one, but displacement doesn't mean we don't want to have people come. You know, we want all of this to be, you know, a community space for all walks of life, but I have to travel very, very long and hard to go get soul food now, and I'm not really happy about that.
Thank you so much. David?
Yeah, actually, I just want to say I love what Zarita had said, and she's actually covering some of the topics that I'm kind of going over. I have quite a bit to cover. I'll make it as concise as possible and as orderly as possible because I'm sort of jotting things out randomly. But when I look at neighborhoods, you know, and in particular older neighborhoods like Boyle Heights or Lincoln Heights and El Sereno, we have to think of them as like micro neighborhoods or neighborhoods within neighborhoods. That's why I'm very supportive of the corner store concept, allowing these smaller retail you know, shops and businesses to actually be present in the community so that community members can actually go to these things rather than having to go to a 20,000 square foot chain retail store. Something that Christopher had commented on about the architect Richard Neutra, Schindler, and so on. There is an architect, an international architect named Gregory Ain, who built the Avenel housing project. And this was a small-scale development built in the 1930s, where he incorporated modular walls and units within, you know, each housing or apartment. Again, these are things that need to be adapted, you know, along with the bungalow or the fourplex, you know, where or nothing, or single family home or large scale development. There has to be a hybrid. You know, there is a project happening in Boyle Heights where essentially it should have 25 units and they're planning on putting 60 in without any parking as a transit oriented development. And so everything needs to be very case by case to the surrounding areas. And sometimes we may have to sacrifice those extra units for the health and the community overall and say, you know what, we really don't need 60 units. We should sacrifice those to make it a healthy.
I just wanted to say that I feel that for sustainability, for the purpose of sustaining our communities, we need to have a framework that's going to protect repair and invest in and transform our community so that no one is left behind. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we need to support community and tenant opportunity to purchase through legislation, public funding, and access public properties. And one of those one of the legislations that could be supported would be the right of first offer for tenants to be able to buy the multi-unit buildings, and also support in the future legislation like AB 1703, that is residential real property, the sale of rental properties, and the right of first offer locally and statewide. That's currently being drafted. And this is with the envision of being able to have landlords sell their buildings to organized tenants that can continue preserving and have community control through the Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act. And this is a narrative that we're working on as COTs. And I'm very familiar with, I was very excited to hear someone mention about a transit-oriented community, because that's something that I've been working for many years. Like I live right across Mariachi Plaza. Since 2014, we advocated to have Metro develop something there. That lot has been there for like over 14 years sitting empty. And so we know that since we know that we are in a housing crisis, we want to see affordable housing for families, for the youth that is homeless. We want to be able to have a community garden. I mean, the biggest green space here in Boyle Heights is the cemetery. And so we have to maximize our resources. And so since we do have a space and we have our third generation members who are willing to teach the new generations to harvest food, and not only harvest food, but harvest community within the neighbors. This is a perfect example of creating something out of nothing. At the end of the day, the land still belongs to Metro, but most of the people here in our community are gonna have access to something that we normally wouldn't have access to. And I think that's how our community should work, by being inclusive and being able to reimagine how we can sustain our communities. And the resiliency would be to have that support from the community, from the city, and being able to sustain our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really beautifully said. Vivian, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to address a few things. Some information I ended up putting into the chat. And, speaking about TOCs and TODs, which are just not suitable for the community of Boyle Heights. Again, with the space that's over at the Mariachi Plaza would be a perfectly good example of bungalows where we can actually have some green space. But then again, we are also leaving out and discriminating against the working class. And I think that that's something that we are not addressing. And it's important that, they give an opportunity also to be able to afford some of these units. And we aren't building a lot of these mega units with single units or one bedrooms. Again, we're leaving out the middle class. And also with regards to healthier communities, it would be nice to challenge, I'd like to challenge our car manufacturers and create more competitive vehicle manufacturers, building smaller electric vehicles. And these manufacturers can be a part of building a new community for first-time home buyers. And no one is talking about home ownership anymore. And everybody's just saturated with sticking everything in just a specific area. We have plenty of room to grow, and we need to share the land and create more communities, more jobs, have families have an opportunity to have housing, which they do not, and have garages where they can park. And again, I actually, I don't support a lot of products, from China, which I mentioned on the chat as well, but I actually am buying the most adorable, cute little car from China with freight and everything that I have to pay for, the bells and the whistles to have it delivered to my home. It's going to cost around $3,000. This little vehicle is going to get me around all over. It can go from all the way from Long Beach to Pasadena and still have enough to charge to keep me going running around. It has enough room for 2 small people and groceries in the back. And I have to buy this vehicle because I can't park in my space. If I do park away, if I do drive away, I'm not going to have my parking space again. And something that's also cost effective, that's smarter than a smart car, that's economical, that just plug it in. It's good for the environment, such as like the monorail situation. I mean, again, eliminate the TOC, TODs, get some monorails in here. Let's do smart manufacturing of vehicles, work with somebody, a company that can make these smaller vehicles that are affordable for these new, for example, for these new communities. Let's, we don't even have a pilot, community where we can actually build something that's going to be just so great as a pilot for future communities to have, such as with, a little electric cars, with monorails, with homes. Again, give everybody an opportunity to have homes, build more communities, and we're leaving out like a lot of the single, the working class, especially in Boyle Heights. So if you come from a family, you graduate, you go to college, you come back, you don't want to be living with your parents anymore. You want to live in your community, but you can't because you don't qualify for the low income housing. And there are no single units that are available for any of us to rent. And so that's kind of like reverse discrimination. We've got to include everybody. And again, we don't need to continue to saturate everybody and create more high density, especially in Boyle Heights. And again, all communities are different. We love our historic community. It's a very, very wealthy, rich historic community. And we need to respect that and honor that, as we are also trying to work with the Brooklyn Avenue mixed use corridor and wanting also to create, the Japanese corridor, which has been completely ignored, So again, it's for all people throughout Boyle Heights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vivian. I want to let Christopher get the last word in before we pass it back to the NCSA board, because I know we have announcements as well before we wrap up in about 15 minutes.
Thanks, Dominique. I just want to thank everyone for all of your comments, for your time on a Saturday afternoon, and for really helping give us a tightly focused set of comments, which really will directly inform the brief for this design challenge. To reiterate something that my colleague Alejandro put in the chat, we will, because you all registered, I think we have contact information for all of you. We'll share the news when the design challenge is launched in the second half of October. The last thing I'll say, just coming back to 2 comments, which I was really struck by, what Zarita had to say and what Lorraine had to say, I think they're both right. And I want to talk about why I think that is and why this design challenge and these listening sessions are specifically trying to hone in on the balance between the points of view that they both express. So Lorraine is right that from a land use point of view, from a sustainability point of view, we can no longer build the way that we have, and our land use and zoning patterns are absolutely not sustainable for the 21st century. We cannot keep building into the wildland urban interface. We need to pull back and fold that development, that new housing into the city, closer to transit, closer to jobs. The question is how we do that, and Zarita is also right that when we do that, we have to be absolutely mindful of how that new housing will affect communities, the stability of communities, the cohesion of communities, particularly communities of color that have had to fight and scrap to get past exclusionary zoning, racist lending practices, and other elements of housing policy across the 20th century that made it difficult, if not impossible, for them to buy into the LA version of the American dream. So balancing those 2 things is precisely the challenge that we want to ask the architects, landscape architects, and housing experts to help us work through. And it's really, to me, a kind of hearts and minds issue. We don't have a kind of consensus in Los Angeles yet. I don't think we have anything near a consensus about how we strike that balance. And you guys have really helped articulate it and added a lot of useful and important detail. So thanks again, and we look forward to being back in touch with you when we launch the design challenge a little bit later in October.
Perfect. So we'll hand it back to NCSA members for the announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dominique and Christopher. It's been wonderful. There is a question in the chat about folks being able to still submit comments after today's meeting. How would you like to best do that?
Let me just remind everybody what I'd said up front is that we're going to send out an evaluation. And in that evaluation, there is a question, comments that you weren't able to submit yet. So please do take our email, which we'll submit into the chat in a few minutes, and you can share any other thoughts, and we will make sure to send that to the city. We'll also make sure, assuming we're able to save the chat, that the city has access to the chat as well.
Feel a little guilty. I snagged a chunk of your gloves right here by accident.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Lisa. So,
Sorry, with that background noise, I needed to mute everyone, but Ernie, back to you. Sorry.
thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Lisa, for clarifying that. So please look out for the survey and use that approach to submit comments. If you still have comments after that, you should have probably received an email from Dominique with her email address. Would that be okay, Dominique, if folks submit their survey and still have a comment? Great. Okay, fantastic. Just try to get those comments in as quickly as you can, folks, so that we don't miss any deadlines and it can be included. And thank you again, Christopher and Dominique, for hosting this. Let's do the announcements now. It's starting with Jocelyn Giaga Rosenthal. Jocelyn, are you able to unmute yourself and tell us about the Green New Deal? Great.
Okay, I just want to announce the exciting actually development of a toolkit to assist neighborhood councils to implement the Green New Deal plan, LA plan. And so it's available on the NCSA website. There is a link at the end, and I don't know if Lisa, you want to add it to the chat.
Yes, I did include it in the chat.
Okay, great. But you know, the Green New Deal plan has 5 goals, which is zero carbon grid in 2045, zero carbon buildings by 2030, and all buildings by 2050, zero carbon transportation by 2050, zero waste by 2050, and zero wasted water by 2035. But this new toolkit actually brings us down to the weeds and how to implement these goals. And I'm scrolling through these, and they're very attractive plans that include how-to steps, very detailed how-to steps for neighborhood councils. And there are right now 2, 4, 6, 8 toolkits online, and there will be a couple more coming online soon. So I guess that should do it, right?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. It's very exciting to roll out that toolkit for those of you that participated in the Congress of Neighborhoods last weekend. And so please check it out if you haven't already. Ms. Cheryl Thurston Rosenbaum, are you able to unmute yourself to tell us about National Drive Electric Week?
Yeah, so this is National Drive. We're just finishing up National Drive Electric Week. So there's been a lot of excitement around EVs as a part of a green economy to kind of take us out of the pandemic economic stagnation and reduce pollution at the same time. So a lot of information was shared about rebates, offers that make it easy for you to trade in your clunker and buy a new or used EV or hybrid. And NCSA has established a working group to try to educate neighborhood councils on how to incorporate them effectively into their neighborhoods. And we just want to make sure that they're aware of all EV ride sharing opportunities, and then in the future, possibly job training for charging installation or maintenance might be a component of it. I'm going to put a link to the website that describes all what we're working on. And that's it.
Thank you, Cheryl. And so look for that link in the chat now. And next, I'd like to have Mr. Scott Epstein. He's our newest board member. I failed to mention him at the beginning, so I'd like to recognize him now. Scott, you're going to tell us about the Metro survey that's underway right now, which was related to our transportation session. Are you there, Scott?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks so much, Ernie. So we had some really interesting discussion about the intersection of housing and transportation policy today. So I wanted to kind of make you aware of what I think is a pretty exciting policy proposal at Metro, and that is that in the future, perhaps Metro would be transit free. So the Metro board is studying this, and they're probably going to be piloting it in some kind of way. I think it's really exciting, you know, because it hits on both sustainability and social justice. You know, there's an opportunity to increase ridership. I think there's also, you know, an opportunity to benefit our low-income ridership, which is, you know, the dominant piece of our total ridership in Metro. So really exciting. I placed a source article that's Metro's in-house news source that has a link to a survey. So you can, I would encourage you to take that survey, give feedback about this pilot, and also share with your neighborhood councils. I know lots of you guys have active social media pages for your neighborhood council. So this is something that you may want to blast out to your your stakeholders as well. Thanks so much.
Terrific. Thank you, Scott. So yes, very important. Please also try to take that survey. Next, I'd like to have Miss Marielle Nakar. Are you able to unmute yourself, Marielle?
Hi, so we're going to be having our next NCSA meeting on November 14th at 2 p.m. We're not sure how long it is, but we are in the process. It's to be determined, but yeah.
Wonderful. So hope folks can join us on November 14th at 2 p.m. Next, Lisa Hart, Clean Air Day.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, in case you don't, that Clean Air Day is October 7th, and folks are asking everybody to take a pledge. So if you want to take a pledge and do a little something extra on that day, there's a link with ideas about how to do that and to help you take a pledge. And also, I am not just right now including the link to the evaluation, which it also has a question that will allow you to say anything that you didn't have an opportunity to say yet today, or if you have some new ideas or some new thoughts, please enter them into the survey and we will get that information to the city.
Thank you, Lisa. And Dr. Lorraine Lundquist, you have a meeting tomorrow. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yes, I'm the chair of the advocacy committee. If you'd like to advocate around these kinds of issues within the neighborhood council system and for the city of Los Angeles, please join us. We are meeting tomorrow and the first Sunday of every month at 6 p.m. and I will put the meeting Zoom link into the chat.
Terrific. Thank you, Dr. Lundquist. So thank you again to each of you for contributing your time and talent today to help co-create a vision for the future of our neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Special thank you to the first Chief Design Officer of any city in America, LA's Chief Design Officer, Christopher Hawthorne, as well as LA's Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer, Dominique Hargraves, and the NCA board member, Lisa Hart, for their leading roles in coordinating today's event. I'd also like to specifically thank our committee chairs and work group leaders who do much of the heavy lifting that helps the NCSA make a meaningful impact in our neighborhoods, our city, and the planet we all share. One question we often hear at our events is, how can I get more involved? The best answer is through our committees and work groups. These are created and run by people like you, and they need you in order to exist and be effective. I'll quickly mention these groups and a point of contact for each. The first one's the Advocacy Committee with Dr. Lorraine Lundquist, whom you just heard. Second work group is Electric Vehicle Adoption Work Group, which is being led by Lisa Hart. Our Energy Committee is chaired by Dan Cagle. Our Sustainability Guidelines for Developers work group is being led in part by Phil Ganchev. And our Transportation Committee chair is Nancy Matson, as well as our Trees Committee chair, Joanne D'Antonio. You can learn more about the work of these committees and work groups, their community impact statements, and find the appropriate contact for each on our website, which is ncsa.la under the heading Committees and Work Groups. Please find and join us there. The ncsa's.la, and that again is ncsa.la under the heading Committees and Work Groups. Again, we sincerely thank you for your efforts to make our neighborhoods and our city more sustainable. And we hope to see you again soon in an NCSA committee, work group, or at the November 14th NCSA event. Have a wonderful weekend, folks.
Thanks to everyone and be safe.